It's like having the biggest FAQ in the world, right, about your product. You've got to be able to provide that. And also remember, during the live stream, you're going to get those questions in real time from consumers as well. So you've got to be able to arm the teams running the live streams with the capability to answer those questions.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy and leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify, another really interesting and topical episode. Today we are talking about how do e-commerce brands expand into China. And with all of the geopolitical chaos that's going on in the world, the Chinese market has been important for many years, but actually some of these markets in Asia are coming back into the fore, given some of the challenges in other markets with tariffs. So I've got a highly experienced digital leader as my guest today, who I've had the joy of working with personally on a project before. So a warm welcome to Lockie, who's Global Digital Director at Panacea. Hey, Will, how are you?
I'm really good, thanks, James. What a pleasure to be here. I'm an avid listener of the podcast and super looking forward to today.
I love it. There we go. Shameless plug about why everyone else should be avidly listening all the time to the podcast. But before we get into the questions about China, and I mean, we've had to be really focused because let's face it, launching in China is a massive topic. So we're gonna try and be laser focused today. But do you want to give people a little bit of an intro to who you are, what you do, kind of like your background and what brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, of course, James. What I thought would be fun is a quick whistle-stop tour around the world, following the international flavour of your podcast, and a little bit of tech, because I know the listeners, like me, love to hear about what platforms people are on, etc. Really briefly, I mean, I started my career in retail. I was in marketing in the music industry. Then along came a company called Apple, and they had this thing called iTunes and iPod. And at that point, I realised, maybe digital's the future. So decided to leave the world of music marketing, got myself trained at a digital marketing agency, and ended up client side at a UK multi-brand SME called Ebony Cycles. And that was really where I kind of cut my teeth on all things retail, e-com builds, omni-channel projects. The tech back in those days, those were the on-prem days. So it's free SaaS. Think, I see you smiling, think Hybris, think IBM WebSphere, those days. Anyway, so cut my teeth there. Quickly realised, having done the UK, I wanted sort of global experience. I've always wanted to work abroad, find that sort of fascinating. Along came George Jensen, like a global luxury monobrand, a design house, very famous in Denmark. So I went over to George Jensen in Copenhagen, headed up the digital team there, in leading teams across EMEA. Funny enough, the brand was really big in APAC. So obviously big in the Nordics, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, etc. But really big in Taiwan, Australia. So good. So that was my first introduction really to sort of, if you like, managing teams in completely different parts of the world, completely different cultures. So really super interesting. The tech in those days, this was my sort of SaaS demandware era. Everybody was on Salesforce Commerce Cloud at that time, totally dominating the market. After George Jensen, COVID came along, so I wanted to come back to the UK. Ended up at the Rug Company where we met James on one of our projects. So again, luxury business, luxury interiors, super high average order value. Interestingly, that one, most of the business in the US, and actually B2B, so it's selling to interior designers, as you well know. And that was really, I guess, in terms of the tech, the start of working with, SaaS platforms that we kind of know today, BigCom, Shopify, etc. Moved on from the Rug Company and ended up where I'm now at Noble Panacea. So luxury skincare, again, super high average order value, well, for skincare, so about 500 USD. And interestingly, this business, most of the business in the US and China, which we're going to talk about today. These are our key markets for growth. And of course, we are still in the Shopify BC era, plus a bit of AI, I will add.
Excellent. I love that. It's like Phileas Fogg around the world tour of e-com. Yeah. God, yes, those days of on-prem. I remember working for a e-com agency in implementing those, and just the amount of fun it was with support and maintenance. yes, how the world's changed. But today, we're talking about China, and launching in China is a massive topic. And for a lot of people who have forays into it, this will be really interesting to hear how you have managed it for a new launch. But those who might be considering looking at other markets will be fascinated into, I guess, the structure and the approach and like the advice of what works and learnings along the way. So why don't we start with why is China such a fascinating market for e-commerce?
Yeah, let's start there. I mean, I'll start by sort of saying, this is what I've learned. And I think that's the funnest kind of talks and the funnest podcasts are always when you can actually just hear what people have learned. So I'll just try and take you through our journey a little bit. One quote that springs to mind, I was talking to someone in my network recently, I was talking about China. And they said to me, yeah, you know what it is about China? It teaches you how to accelerate and lean into digital on a seismic scale. And I thought that was a really nice way to sum it up, because the words like seismic scale, the scale is just staggering. The thing that I find so fascinating about this market for e-commerce is because it's so unlike what you've been trained for here in the West. So our world of platforms, SIs, vendors, tech, all the things that we deal with day in, day out, it just doesn't exist. So you've got to sort of retrain your brain, just turn on its head. It's so completely different. Probably the easiest way to sum it up, why it's so fascinating, is that the customer journey is sort of completely contained end to end in the app ecosystems, right? So you will start on one app in social and that go end to end through to payment. Rather here over in the West, you've got all these disparate systems, platforms, CRM, PIM, e-com, etc., blah, 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 that you're, connecting together. In China, it's just all one seamless in-app journey. And so that's one sort of on the sort of techie side of things. Then bigger picture is probably around, everything there is kind of quicker, faster, bigger. The logistics is staggering. The size of the market is just staggering. I think the other thing I've learned really about the consumer is the sort of the Chinese consumer is almost sort of way sort of suited to e-commerce. Like they want fully detail. They do a ton of research. They want to compare. They want convenience. So all of these things that like e-com and digital is super suited for matches the consumer mindset in a way. Plus also there's like just a ton of shopping festivals and moments, Double 11, Double 12. There's a ton of them. So your trading calendar is full and there's always something to do.
Out of interest, which of your preconceptions from having worked in the UK and other markets did you find the hardest to like reprogram the mind on? Was it about the not having agencies and platforms, or was it something else that you found the hardest to adjust to?
That's a really good question, James. I think that's part of it. I think it is part of it's just quite simply how to do business. Like you are used to having a team doing certain things in certain roles, running certain systems. That one kind of goes away in China because you got a one-stop shop really in your TP or your agency, which kind of, I guess, the equivalent to the SI, but they're going to do everything end to end. Right? So they'll do all of your performance marketing, they'll do all of your fulfillment, they will load up products in the store, etc. So that kind of goes away. So actually, really, what you are left with at its core is, being the internal brand side team, is planning and managing your calendar and your marketing activity and really honing in on that, because success, almost wholly depends on how much awareness can you build in the market, how much content can you put out in the market, how many live streamers have you got on the go, how many KOLs, cases, all of that. You're creating demand and then people come on the platforms and buying, and obviously take care of the hygiene there. But I think it is that adapting your mindset more to focus on which platforms am I going to focus on. Is it just Tmall, Redbook, and really honing in on that, as opposed to, over here in the West, about, right, okay, I've got to run Google, Meta, and then I've got to make sure my site is well merchandised. That kind of is just less of a focus because it really is about going through.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Excellent. And we're going to come back onto resourcing like a Chinese operation later, but let's start with you said to me when we were talking about this podcast that the skincare is the top selling category for beauty in China. So obviously the market demand is there, but what made you and the business side that now's the right time for market entry?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of coupled to what I said is simply the size and the scale of the opportunity there. And it's really where our target audience is, given the category that we're in, so luxury skincare. The interesting thing, which I didn't know actually, about China and sort of East versus West, is within beauty, sort of in the West, traditionally, it's makeup first, fragrance, then skincare. But like you go East, that's reversed. So it's a skincare first market, then like fragrance and makeup. So the consumer mindset, complexion of the skin and so on, the consumer mindset is all around skincare, skin health, and all of the things associated with looking after your skin. So it's just completely natural for us as a brand, being technology-led, science-led. There's a nice match there in, the consumers looking for technical details, solutions, and just, the size of the prize, if you will.
And how did you approach this and build a go-to-market plan? Because there's so many things to look at in terms of the market, competitors, sales opportunities, channels, compliance, etc. So what advice can you share with other e-com leaders or e-com teams about how would you approach this in a systematic and controlled way?
Yeah, I think my first comment on that is actually applicable to trading in any market or doing business in any market. Is actually just the number one thing. It sounds really simple, but is go and spend time in the market. Go and talk to people who've worked in the market, have been in the market. Go and explore different models. Go and network in the market, because I think, there's a ton of experts out there, but there is absolutely no substitute. Sounds very basic. There's just no substitute for spending time on the ground to get a feel for what works, what doesn't work. And in China, even more so, because it is so different because of some of the reasons I've just said. Yeah, go and spend time in the market. Being a bit more specific, I think, you can go, there are many good agencies out there that will help you enter the market, that will help you build your go-to-market plan, that will already know, what the competitor looks like for your competitors. They will know. It's super interesting because, all of the sales data out of the platforms is available, right? So they can pull it all and instantly tell you versus your competitor set, well, how are people trading? Do you get that in the West? Nope. So if that's really, and that again is, gives you a real sense of the scale and the volume, then that kind of insight is just readily available. I think the other interesting thing that I learned a bit related to spending time in the market is you keep finding things out. The more people you talk to is like, oh, that works. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, we can do that. Oh, we can do that. So I think, keeping an open mind and having those conversations with people is just the number one thing.
And how about from a product point of view? Because I find this really interesting. I've worked with a lot of different brands in different verticals, going into different markets, mainly in Europe, some in the US, etc. And product strategy I find fascinating, about how divergent it might need to be to hit the local market and what you have to do to make your products compliant. So can you talk us through that? How did you approach that? Is it just same products packaged differently, or is it completely different ranges?
Basically, this is quite specific to skincare. The formulations and the ingredients all have to be legally compliant in the market. So it's a little bit different than selling a pair of shawls. So in that regard, you need to get everything passed, signed off, and compliant. And that is effort. You need to take all the legal advice. It's very different. Because once, the equivalent, once you are trading as a local entity, once you are selling domestically, and in effect the equivalent of a manufacturer in the given market, is very different. And in order to be able to trade as such in that market, you need to have all of the appropriate licenses, stamps, certificates, you name it. There's quite a lot involved, and getting tests. One example would be, for example, in the skincare world, sort of your claims of efficacy, test results, and so on. They're like super important. They're a core of any marketing to show the consumer, well, this product actually works, and we've tested it and we can prove it. On that piece of content in China, there will be, a huge chunk of text proving that this was being validated, has been passed, and is in compliance. So that's very different for us. We were kind of lucky on a bit more on the product side of things. We were kind of lucky in that we have a couple of hero products specifically related to which is a huge topic in China. Actually, we found out on our last trip. Sleep deprivation, screen addiction. These are all huge topics at the moment, not just in China, everywhere. So we do have a couple of products that are specifically related to when you're asleep, and that fits well with kind of the zeitgeist, shall we say.
Interesting. And linked to this is that China is often associated with like red tape, bureaucracy, and very specific ways of working. So what was your experience like? What were the key challenges you had to overcome? How long did it actually take to get through those compliance checks and certifications?
Allow yourself a bare minimum 12 months. It's a long process. It's complex to set up an entity, and you just need a good lawyer, in short, and to set it all up correctly. Who knows how to do it. And there's plenty of them out there, and there's plenty of businesses that can advise you on that, both here in the UK and in the market. So, yeah, and I think I'll sort of revert back to what I said previously, is that you talking to people in the market will often allow you to find out the quickest route around that. Because there might be one piece of advice, but actually, so-and-so did it like this. Maybe we can do it like that. And that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah, and you said obviously you work with local advisors. How do you, I guess for anyone listening, because it can sometimes feel quite daunting of finding an advisor, because you think, where, who, how do I know this? So how did you go about that? Who have you worked with? And what the key value, I guess, what's the key value proposition? What do they bring that you can do yourselves?
Yeah, for sure. Like you absolutely, if you are completely new to the market and let's say, your team has no experience of entering China, don't go off and try and do it yourself, obviously. There are many partners in the UK, like an example, Hotpot China. They are a business that know the market so well. They can take a UK brand or a Western brand and give you a good go-to-market strategy. Jonathan and Adam at Hotpot, they're true China experts. They're in the market all the time. So a blend of sort of outside partners and advisors and agencies on the ground and employees on the ground. That was the other thing is, there is absolutely no substitute for hiring talent on the ground that has a network in Shanghai or Beijing that can be lent on to, make things work, get stuff done, and make things happen, basically, and crucially, work with your TP and sort of at a one-to-one level.
And coming back to that point you made earlier about it critical to spend time in market, which I fully agree with, because having a cultural understanding is really important when you're trying to understand how business is done. But how did you start that? What was your first? Did you find your local advisor first and then use them to help set up connections, or did you just go to like events? How did you get to put your feet on the ground and do things?
All at the same time. yeah, I mean, quite common approach really is, hire in the market, find a legal advisor in the market, hire in the market, open an office in the market, as well as having advisors, like I mentioned, HubSpot and others. So a blend really, and finding leaders in the market to represent your brand is probably like the number one thing. So having a GM in the market, a general manager in the market, who has a good network, will get you far, basically, because that's what we have found is just absolutely essential.
Sound advice. Let's come back to that thing about losing the preconceptions. How e-commerce is executed is very different. So the online store experience, as you touched on, is very different. Most sellers done via the big marketplaces, and you launched, if I got it right, you launched on Tmall Global first. So what was it? Why there? Why start there?
Well, Tmall Global is open, right? So any brand can sell on Tmall Global, but you're mindful that the prices can be higher because you're subject to import duty, right? So it's an easy way to sort of test the market, and everybody will tell you Tmall Global or TMG is a great starting point, which is fine, but you're never going to achieve like sort of volume through it. So our route was start there, of course, get the brand known, and start building some awareness. For me, probably the number one learning we had in the market is, as early as possible, start building awareness. And if that's listing on Tmall Global and doing content on Little Red Book, great. But our journey was essentially open up the local entity, list, and then once you've done that, then you can sell domestically on Tmall Classic or TMC, and that's where you have local prices basically, and that's where the consumer is effectively. So that was the easiest route. There are other platforms, of course. We mentioned a few, but Tmall for us is a starting place. Got the volume. They also have the luxury pavilions. That's something maybe to work towards in the future. So yeah, and given our price point, it's a natural fit.
And the next question I'm really interested in is WeChat, because WeChat is huge. We'll see in China, WeChat has its own payments. I'd love to hear about how you're seeing the role of WeChat in the purchase journey, and also how that ecosystem works for like post-purchase, because as you said, like over here, we're so used to, you go to a website, potentially you buy, there's data pushed into a CRM or into an ESP, and there's follow-up marketing, and there's retargeting in the social, but you have these combined ecosystems. So I'd love to hear how you've seen, what was it like? What's the user journey look like? And what's the opportunities for you as a brand?
It's like super interesting. I'm glad you asked about that one, because that was one of the things when I first bought something, I was like, had this moment like, oh, that's how quick it is. And I'll explain a little bit more. So obviously, WeChat has got payments embedded. So, if I'm buying something in store at the counter, I'll rock up, get the item, and in one scan, I have paid for said item. I am on the brand's WeChat mini program, aka CRM, to your point. So there's no email, there's nothing else. I'm just straight into like a one-to-one chat with the sales assistant. And in simple terms, that's kind of it. There's a lot to prove it. But just that sort of example of a sort of condensed or shortened customer journey kind of sums it up a lot, because it's like, it's so quick, basically, completely contained within the app ecosystem. A little bit more, because it's quite interesting. So within WeChat, they have something called a mini program. So effectively, that is a brand's mini CRM program. It's like a mini brand zone. So when I was scanned, when my WeChat ID was scanned, I'm then added in to that brand's mini program. And then I'm getting messages, for example, from McLaren's or a host of other beauty brands when they have offers, when they have things happening in store, or when they have things happening online. So it's like super rich, and it's skips all of that stuff that you mentioned. There's no email, there's no city, there's nothing else going on. You're straight into that conversation. And you're also completely skipping the card ecosystem that we're so used to over here. And then that becomes, again, like just another super rich data point, because they know. So the back end of WeChat know exactly where you were, how much you spent, what you bought. And that's sort of like the secret part that all of us in the West wish we knew about our customers, right? You like tapping into payment details is complicated, as we all know. So because they've skipped cards and you're straight into wallet payments, it's super rich. One example, actually, I really like. I was in one of the malls, and Clarins had like a sample vending machine. So you're in the mall, you walk up to the vending machine, you scan the QR with your WeChat, you get a skincare sample, and straight away you're into their CRM program within a few minutes. So again, a really nice example of a condensed customer journey, and straight into the database, basically.
And is that free samples then? Well, you paid for it?
Yeah, I'm giving you effectively, I'm signing up to your program.
Yeah.
The equivalent of your, give me your email address and I'll give you stuff.
Yes. Yeah, amazing though, isn't it? I just done through basically a payment app that then has all your data to, yeah, really interesting actually. Which for somebody who, like me, I mean, I totally get it on the consumer level. Somebody like me who outside of work doesn't want to look at his phone other than to check rugby scores, it terrifies me.
That thing that is it, is that in China they've effectively, they've skipped bigger screens, everything's mobile first.
Yeah.
And that has pros and cons, but that whole being contained within the app ecosystem just brings so much opportunities for brands, and they're just like super rich.
It does. I remember looking at this a good few years back when the comparisons are being made between China and the West about our evolution because of the nature of our countries with so many tailed cities and so much more infrastructure from a desktop point of view. The complexities that then brings into like user experience, user journeys versus missing out that entire desktop and going straight into mobile. It definitely has some succinct advantages from a data and CRM point of view.
Yeah, and the infrastructure there is to back it up, right? 5G everywhere you go is faster than most towns and cities, I'll bet, in the UK.
Yes, yeah. Well, I haven't regularly suffered on any train journey in this country to get any decent signal, even for a phone call. We have a long way to go in terms of connectivity. The other bit I really want to chat about, and it's an area that I really wish Western countries like the UK had embraced a bit more. And every year I'm still waiting for it to be the year of live shopping. But culturally, we're just not so in tune with it. Live video streams in social, massive. Actual live shopping out of some of the big channels and maybe a few brands doesn't really taken off so much, but it's massive in China. So do you want to talk us through like what does live shopping mean to Panacea? How are you using it? What's the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of linked, right? So if you think about it in the context of live shopping plus KOL, or live shopping plus influencer, or influencer plus live shopping, it's that blend of having celebrities or consumers, literally talking through your product, how to use it, all the details and so on. And I think how we've used it is, what we learned is just like, it is critical. So, and especially in a super noisy category like skincare in this market, you need to do it because it quite simply is how consumers shop. The benefit that it gives the consumer is you get an absolute ton of detail before you make up your mind to purchase that you just don't sort of get from reading through a PDP, for example. So, live streamers will talk for 30 minutes about one product, the ingredients, how to use it, efficacy, good. All of the packaging, this in sort of minute detail. They have these things called hand cards, right? So you give them the hand cards, and it has just all the detail that they use when they do the live streaming. So yeah, you can't avoid it. It's super, super important to have celebrities, KOLs doing the live streams. We run ours on Little Red Book because that's the actual fit for where our audience are. And in the beauty and skincare category, Little Red Book, that's just important. The things to kind of watch out for, right? So it can be very deal led. So, you have to adjust your mindset a little bit. Let's say, you're sort of super premium and high luxury brand. You have to adjust your mindset a little bit, in the sense that you're going to have to offer a gift with purchase, for example. You're going to have to offer some things that perhaps you may not necessarily used to in the West. So the consumer mindset is very sort of value orientated. The other thing we learn actually about the market in general, but and particularly in the live streaming, is returns rate can be really high. It really can be high because sort of impulse purchases and then regret afterwards. 80% is not unheard of in some of the key shopping periods like Untitled Chapter. But bringing it down to having a conversation like, oh, a returns rate of 30%. Oh, that's good. Like most of us would be like, whoa, that's so that's the equivalent of fashion in the West, right? Mm. So those sorts of things, learnings and understanding what is okay, what is good performance, and what isn't, is interesting. And the other thing, I'd probably just say, who is doing your live streaming and your live shopping is also super important, because who is endorsing it, who you've got talking through your product. In certain categories, there's a few celebrities that dominate. Alibaba have got Austin Lee. This guy is just the scale's absolutely staggering. Everything he touches sells. And in the beauty, there's others like that also. So, finding arrangements with these people is important. The other really interesting thing I think about the live streaming that we learn is putting a GMV on everything is another way to say it, in the sense that whoever you start working with, whether they're KOL, a consumer, or a sales opinion leader, and all of them will have effectively a revenue projection, and in working with those that you can almost guarantee a return with is just a little bit of a different mindset as well. So yeah, quite commercial.
Yeah, I find this fascinating, and I guess a related question for me is, spend up to 30 minutes on one product. It feels really counterintuitive, doesn't it, to the fast-paced world we live in digital, where attention spans are shrinking and everything's micro moments. So how do you approach that from a content point of view? Because 30 minutes, I run a podcast, and I know how much time and effort it takes to prepare and make sure we've got tangible things to talk about, rather than just hoping that we've got 30 minutes of content. So yeah, how would you go from a PDP to 30 minutes of audio? Because the number of words you can get out in 30 minutes on audio is quite extensive.
Yeah. You need to provide the detail. Right? And again, a bit going back to what I said at the beginning, consumer mindset. They want to consume a lot of detail about the product. They want to know where it's from, what it's made of, efficacy, all of these things that go into making a decision to purchase. You need to provide it all. So you need to provide evidence. The other learning for us is to be better at that, quite frankly, is that you will get an absolute ton. It's like having the biggest FAQ in the world, right, about your product. You've got to be able to provide that. And also remember, during the live stream, you're going to get those questions in real time from consumers as well. So you've got to be able to arm the teams running the live streams with the capability to answer those questions. So yeah, it's like having the detail, doing your homework really, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I guess also the benefit of that is it forces you to properly scrutinize and understand your product your messaging, your hierarchy, and ensure that if you, as you said, you have to go through all these compliance checks anyway, so you have to have all of that legal and compliance data behind it before you can start selling.
100%. Yes, no, really good point, because of that level of scrutiny, it will reveal things about your business and brand that you probably thought, okay, maybe we can use that elsewhere, right? Because that level of detail or a particular point that might be the consumer, thought you use it elsewhere. And
well, maybe this is, for anyone listening, maybe this is the way that you solve your product data and attribute issues where you can't get the business to buy in. Just get everyone to launch in China, then you have to do it anyway, and then you can just take that discipline back to your other countries.
Good shout.
It's only 12 months and quite a lot of money, but don't worry. So the next thing I got a question around is, and you touched upon it earlier about the fact that like paid media in especially like UK, Europe, yes, is massive, but so much happens through the apps in China. What is a performance marketing and a social strategy in a Chinese market? What does it look like? What are you doing? How are you executing?
Yeah. There's similarities and differences. The similarities, I think I mentioned earlier, right? So really focusing on building awareness first. Fine. That's no news to anyone. Start doing that in social. Got it? Yeah. We all know that. So start seeding, start doing that work early on. That's a given before you start doing performance marketing. Okay. But the big difference here is that you're going to be working probably in a couple of platforms, right? And you're going to be selecting a couple of, a selection of KOLs to do that seeding work. And that approach isn't that different to the West. The platforms will help you do that. And I think the other thing is there is, almost everywhere you go in Shanghai, there's an influencer, right? So there's a lot of people doing it. So coming through is interesting there. I think the thing that we found, which was actually sort of, it's quite eye-opening really, because once you start looking at performance marketing, so let's say, right, you've done your awareness, you've working with some KOLs, you've done some product seeding, you've got a level of content out there. And by the way, counting the pieces of content that you're putting out is pretty much going to be your measure of awareness. So any TP, for example, James, you go over there and you say, well, I want to start multiple like brand. Well, how many pieces of content have you put out there? How many videos have you got out there? How much content is out there? What's the volume out there? Because that is the sort of most simple measure of how well your brand's going to perform. That then should, if everything's going okay, translate into people searching for your brand in the platforms. How many people are then searching for our brand on Tmall because they've seen content outside of the platforms, they're now in the platform, hopefully on the buying journey. But the thing that we learn, actually sort of behind the scenes, under the hood, for example, some of the ad tech, so some of the things that a lot of the listeners would be used to over here in the West. So some of the tools around, I think, say like audience building in Meta, it's actually just not sophisticated over there. And actually what we realized is that a lot of it is sort of under the hood, behind the scenes, manual wrangling of data. I'm not saying it's unsophisticated, but what I'm just hinting at is that you realize why there's armies of people just running your campaigns, because there's a lot of manual work involved in setting up a retargeting, setting up a posting schedule on Little Red Book. There's actually some level of, it's not just like, here you're head of social on Instagram and you put up a post on Instagram. Straightforward. It's not quite the same in China. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us, is how much work is involved and how many people are behind the scenes, whether it be at the TP or at the platform, to get the work done. Interestingly, when we went to visit Little Red Book, And this made us realize this when we went to visit Little Red Book. I think we queued for about half an hour to get into an elevator. There wasn't that many people, literally hundreds, all going up to sit at their desks. And it really made us realize this. And once we start talking and saying, okay, can we do this? Can we do this? Is that in Meta? Is that no? Okay, so they begin to understand. And I think that, again, is sort of a learning to take away from spending time talking to them.
Yes, the art of talking to people and learning from them, never to be underestimated. I've got a final question for you, which is around resourcing and team structure, because I'd love to hear how you've gone about it, because you also talked about having local advisors and external partners. But how have you resourced internally? Like, did you have a separate team? Do you just deliver it within your existing team? And what role do externals play versus what you take ownership of?
Yeah. I mean, we're like super lean. We're not a huge team size. So we have a small team on the ground. I think I mentioned earlier, hiring in some of those senior roles, like having a GM on the ground, super important. So they are taking care effectively of the planning, making sure that the campaigns are being set up correctly. They will effectively, follow the global plan, make sure stock is on the ground, and make sure assets are in place to launch said campaign at any given time. That's all fairly straightforward. They are managing the TP, right? So they are managing closely the TP to execute said campaign, to fulfill, do the marketing, and so on. That's one model, though. I mean, there are different models. We talked. You mentioned Tmall Global earlier. Like, you could just go into the market there, sell on Tmall Global, and probably achieve a good amount of sales there, and just employ a TP, not have anybody on the ground. There are brands like Rafa that have done that super well, and have sold very well in the market as a result. Our approach, though, was be on the ground in the market. Given the size of the opportunity, we would like to own it more and own how our brand represented. The other part to that, literally around physical representation, is that we opened a pop-up store in Plaza 66 in Shanghai. Obviously, to open up a physical store, it's very different to selling online. So, and obviously we need a team on the ground to do that in terms of sales associates, managers, etc. We've also just opened in Hangzhou Tower, which is another big city outside of Shanghai. So to have the full model, to have the physical, the online retail, you have to have people on the ground, basically. And it's worked super well. The other thing that we really learned was having that team supported by, the global team or my team in London also is super important, like to make sure that the team on the ground is supported in, giving them assets or helping them plan budgets, forecasts, trade plans, whatever it is. We can help do that. And that team, have also enjoyed spending time in the market and learning, building relationships. And that's when, things really start to work well. Like, you have a local team on the ground, you have a global team sat wherever, working together well, communicating, and then you get results.
Amazing. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, because I think often the question on everyone's lips around international expansion is, how do I structure this? How does my team need to diverge from where it is now, or can I do it with that existing one? So that's really, really interesting. And Will, thanks so much for joining us. I know everyone listening will have got a load of value out of this. And if anyone wants to connect with Will, I highly recommend it. He's always good value to chat to around all things e-commerce and generally in life. His contact details are on the landing page. But yeah, Will, thanks so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed that.
It was an absolute pleasure and lovely to chat to you as always.
Yeah, well, good luck with the expansion plans and for the growth in China, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.